This is Comic Geek Speak, Book of the Month Club, Episode 15, The Inhumans. Welcome to Comic Geek Speak. I'm Brian Deemer.
I'm Matt.
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Jamie D.
And I'm Peter Rios.
And this Book of the Month Club episode is sponsored by In Stock Trades. You can get the Inhumans and all of past and future Book of the Month Club selections at In Stock Trades for at least 35% off. There you go. Thus ends the sponsorship.
Quick and easy.
And if this would be your first Book of the Month Club episode, know that it is going to be spoilers, as we're going into great detail on this book.
It's spoilerific. Taking a look at Inhumans, Marvel Knights limited series from Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee. One of the 4 titles that kicked off the Marvel Knights line. Edited by Jimmy Palmiotti and Joe Quesada. Who actually read this as it was coming out?
I did.
You actually read it as it was coming out?
Yep, so did I.
I read it in trade in 2000, so it was only like a year after it was over that I read the trade.
I think I caught it near the end. At least the last 3 or 4 issues. Just because I heard people talking about it.
Was
So
this
I had
the
to go back and find all the
first
issues.
Marvel Knights to come out, or
One of the first 4. There was 4
but
that came. I don't know.
I can't remember why I picked it up because I'm not an Inhumans fan overall. I think I picked it up strictly because it was Marvel Knights and I wanted to try it.
It was a hell of a line. Daredevil, this and Black Panther, and
I didn't get Black Panther.
I eventually got into that one. Yeah. Well, except for the Punisher thing that came out, that was kind of a bust. But all the other stuff was hot, and it made me interested in Marvel again. I mean, I was like, this is a hell of a line. So,
oh, yeah. It was a great resurgence of Marvel.
Yeah. It was a nice mix of you could tell that Palmiotti and Quesada were really about finding great creative teams, interesting stories, and not being afraid to do things with the stories. And
with existing established characters.
Yeah, right. And it really was the whole reason why I started reading Marvel again after a couple years. I mean, it really was. This stuff was powerful stuff. So does it hold up? What do you guys think? What do you guys think? For those who've read it before,
I got a little bored in the middle. Not totally turned off or anything, but I'm like, okay, I remember this. Didn't hold up quite as well for me, but I still enjoyed reading it.
Well, I thought it got stronger the second time I read it.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing because it had been so long since I had read it. I had the overall outline in my mind. I remembered the high points, but I couldn't for the life of me remember why. Why didn't Black Bolt do what he was doing? What was his plan? And so to me that held up. And also held up because, and I was asking, and nobody could remember if I think this was one of the books. Now, it wasn't Daredevil late, but I believe this is a book that didn't come out in 12 months. I believe this is a book that, like the later issues, there was maybe like a month or a 90-day type period in between issues. So, because I can remember reading issues and not remembering the issue before, and usually with a monthly book, I can do that. I can remember what happened, but I remember reading this and forgetting stuff that happened before. And towards the end, I thought it had just been a little bit late.
Well, and to be honest, I had 2 problems with this time around, and one of them I had the first time around. The secondary characters, I still had a hard time figuring out who they were as the story went on, just because I forgot. Like, I would read, I'm like, okay, until the kids went through the Tarragon myths and really started to have their own look, I was just getting confused with some of the names as I kept reading it. And for me this time, and I don't know why, well, I guess I do know why, the art distracted me a little bit more than what I remember it doing the first time around. And I don't know if my tastes have changed. It's not bad art. It's not my favorite. And I kept looking at it and looking at all the darkness and the shadows. And I really liked it the first time, and I didn't like it as much this time, and I don't know why.
Well, for me, Jay Lee is an acquired taste. He's an artist, like you said. You either love him or you hate him. There's no real middle ground with the way he draws. And the first time I saw his work was he took over for John Byrne in Namor.
Yeah.
And for me, that I hated. I was so mad because it was like, as big a John Byrne fan as I am. But then the more I looked at his artwork, the more I really dug what he was doing, using the shadows, and it was just such a. While it's kind of a photorealistic, it's not. I mean, I think he uses photorealism on some of the faces, some of the expressions, but overall, I love what he does, his line work, and so on and so forth. So that never has been a problem for this, and if anything, I think I appreciated it more sitting here and reading it all at one shot, because I really, because I could follow. I agree that the new kids, we're not talking Karnak or Gorgon.
No, the mainstays.
Or any of the Inhumans, but yeah, I mean, you kind of throw it into them quickly. You kind of have to realize who they are, and then boom, the Terrigen Mist happens, and then bam, they suddenly become. And yeah, I mean, I forgot who exactly the big gray guy was, from where he went through the mist before. But still, I mean, I understood who each person was. I could follow.
I did really like, and I never realized this the first time around. Well, at least to me, was his name was like what he was, that play on words type thing. Really, I never paid attention to that the first time around. I guess I just don't remember reading going, oh, okay. It seemed to me like they were just playing on him for what he was and what he is now.
Well, I remember for the first time I read it, that character was the one I forgot. I forgot who, and again, no pun intended, who he was, and what his purpose was. And now this second time around, I was like, okay, I'm going to pay more attention to him, especially knowing what happens to him and how integral he is to the entire plot.
I have a question about Black Bolt's brother, and I probably asked this before years ago. Was he always around in Inhumans lore? Because I don't know much past what I've read here at all, other than Crystal, who I've seen before. But the others, like I say, I know the mainstays, but I don't know much else.
Yeah, he was around. I mean, I don't know how soon after the Inhumans were introduced, if he was part of that introduction in Fantastic Four, but he was always their main nemesis.
Okay.
For those who want a quick synopsis of what's going on, is in the book. Basically, the Inhumans live in a city that is supposedly on the same land that is the fabled Atlantis, and there are some factions through what Shane said, Black Bolt's brother Maximus. There are some factions that want to take over the city and pillage the treasures of what they think might be in Atlantis. So. With this whole, they basically attack the city, and with this as a backdrop, this war as a backdrop, you start to want, there's some, each issue is sort of like a standalone issue. It focuses on different parts of the Inhuman society, sometimes on different Inhuman characters, and you start to see that there's this underlying story going on with Black Bolt and not going after the humans. Why is he allowing the humans to attack them? There's a subsection of Inhumans that these youths that become Inhumans, and they're human to begin with, and then they go through this process that unlocks their genetic code, and they become either some gain power, some just gain a different look, and through all of this, what eventually happens is you come to realize that this has been Black Bolt's plan all the time. Because he wants to take the society and take the city and hide them once again. And what better way to hide them but to have the rest of the world think that they've destroyed them? So, and there's so much more to this than just that. But that's a rough overall story.
I liked how you get a structure to their lifestyles. Like now you have to be a certain age to go through the Terrigen Mist, whereas the elders talk about how they did it when they were so young, and there's like a whole structure to it now in their world.
I want to say it's Terrigen.
Yeah,
Is it Terrigen? I always say,
like
I don't know why
mutagen.
I always say Terracon.
That's what I was. What the basic premise behind the Inhumans is that they are. I brought my Marvel Universe. I think the Celestials. Is it the Celestials or the Kree? It's the Kree. They're like an offshoot. The Kree came to the humans and came to Earth and saw that the Celestials messed around and created the Deviants and the Eternals and things like that, and wanted to do sort of the same thing with humans. I guess there's this thing, humans have unlocked potential, and they created the Inhumans, and the thing about them is when they reach a certain age, they're subjected to these Terrigen mists, and whatever's in their DNA, whatever's in their coding, it brings these things out that makes them special, that makes them Inhumans, and they're all different from each other. I guess the premise is that no two Inhumans are alike, and they're outcasts. They're either hiding in the mountains or hiding underwater on the blue area of the moon that's in the Marvel Universe, and because they can't subject themselves to air, or else their immune systems are they like had none or something like that. So
Is that the way it is before they go through the Terrigen mists?
I don't know.
Don't know if they are. I just wondered if any of them ever did get out before they changed, if that was true.
Yeah, I don't know.
How does that work for the Imperial family, though? Because they're always traipsing around with the Fantastic Four and Down on Earth, and Crystal's babysitting for,
Well, they have the antidote that they can take that they can last
true,
for
I
up to
guess.
6 hours in the Earth atmosphere. But,
yeah, that's true.
But they can't last for more than that without taking this.
So if they could just keep every 6 hours, just
Yep.
take it, and they can stay out for a while.
Yeah, and usually they always travel by
Black Bolt.
Lockjaw.
Lockjaw. Jeez.
So he's just zaps him from here to there. So they run out, poof, he gets them right back to where they have to be. And God, Lockjaw's my favorite.
You bring up
I always
Lockjaw.
love Lockjaw.
You bring up Lockjaw, and that is one of my favorite issues. Is number 8. Woof. I just loved Lockjaw's perspective on that.
I really thought Jenkins did a really good job of making us feel like we were not part of the Inhumans. With the issue. Let's see what issue. I think it's issue 3, or maybe it's 2. No, issue 2, where the kids go through their change. And there's a scene where they're showing the one girl, and she's looking at herself in the mirror, and she's this beautiful blonde girl, skinny, and everything. And she's so excited to change, and she turns into this like hideous lizard monster woman.
And can fly.
And for us as regular humans, you go, why would you turn such a beautiful girl into a monster? But she's so happy about her change, and so we can never relate to that. And so he really sets up the difference, and I just can't relate to the Inhumans. I mean, I like the characters, but I just sit here and go, I am definitely not one of these people. These people are totally different than me, and that's good. It sets that up so that you're not.
But I don't know. I think in a way you actually are in your life. I mean, it's not so much where we as humans. Would change that drastically. But if you look at yourself right now, Brian, and you look at yourself when let's say you graduate from high school. Okay, you've marked yourself. I know you have a couple tattoos, so you've marked yourself permanently. You have a mustache and a goatee, which you didn't have when you were a kid. You have a different job, different responsibilities. You're going to become a parent within the next couple months. So, I mean, maybe it isn't as drastic a change as this is. But if you look at yourself, you have changed over the years. And I think that's really what the Inhumans are. They don't realize their potential until they go through the mists and unlocks who they actually are inside. Whereas as a human, you don't go through quite that unlocking. Damn, I am so existential right now. But I think everybody does do that. So, maybe you don't see it quite as drastically as that, but that's the way I feel. I feel everybody, because I could almost relate to that because she is now realizes who she actually is. She realizes why she was put on. She's a flyer. She can fly now, and to me that was so special in the Inhumans world that the royal family knew who she was, as opposed to just a girl who went through the Terrigen Mists. So I don't know. I think that's I think everybody does experience that, but maybe not quite to that level.
I guess, but I mean, going from being beautiful to being disfigured, monster.
Yeah, but she didn't look at herself that way. That was just
But
that was who she was
them,
inside.
That's what makes them different.
Mm-hmm.
If you got scales and turned green, you would be a complete outcast from society in the real world.
Certain society, but look at
in the United States of
look
America,
at
you would be a freak.
Look at the people who put tattoos all over their body, and right now in certain
but that's different.
In certain areas,
that's not turning into a hideous monster.
I personally believe it is.
Yeah, I
apples and oranges. Apples and oranges.
No,
I'm talking about turning into a monster. It's completely different.
But she's not turning into a monster.
What about these people that totally alter their bodies so they look like a cat and tattoo and surgically alter their faces?
Well, that's freakish.
Don't forget the piercings.
And yeah.
But still, it's choosing to be, and it's also her. I don't think she's a monster. That's the whole thing. Because I don't believe in her society she is a monster. I believe she has just reached her full potential.
In her society, I'm talking about if it was in our society, she would
but
be
if you,
a freakish monster.
But if you put in the Inhumans and try to put it into our society, doing the same thing,
You go through the same thing in adolescence.
Yeah, you're not a monster. You are just who you are. I mean, I know exactly what you're saying, Brian.
And that's why but I'm saying that's why he wrote it this way, because the whole world sees the Inhumans as these freaks that they don't understand, and that's why they're trying to just go invade them. Portugal's saying, "Hey, we want our land back. Plus, we also want the secrets." The CIA is like, "We want the secrets of Adelan. We want to know, what's the deal with these? How do they get their powers? And what's the deal? And why are they so weird?" And that's why he's setting it up as turning a beautiful girl into a monster. So,
but maybe for me again, I mean, just as a maybe a guy who doesn't see himself as that attractive of a guy, and I know I'm no Brad Pitt, but I can identify with this. I mean, I can identify with these people who aren't an ugly person who is reaching his potential. Who is finally somebody who's she's gone from she's beautiful, but she has no place in society, to being ugly, but she is then treated as a valuable member of society. I've always been able to identify with that. I mean, I don't know, just me. I've always identified with the underdog, the ugly person, the outcast, the monster. I've always been able to identify with that person. So, to me, that Paul Jenkins, and maybe it's the beauty of his writing, was writing to you saying, this was, I can't ever identify with this person because she's become a monster, whereas I can look at her and say, wow, look at her, she's ugly, but she is this amazing member of society. And to me, that's what it wrote. When he wrote that, it wrote to me that you don't have to be beautiful to be, an amazing and integral part of a society. You can be that ugly monster, but still have the power.
I definitely take Jamie's side on that.
So that's just
I mean, it's how you look at it. I mean,
yeah, sure.
If you're a young kid and all the adults in your society are all different from each other, and yet you see that, and your parents don't look like you at all. Yeah, I mean, they're waiting for that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But that's living in that society.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what's so starkly different from ours.
Right.
Because in our society, everything's supposed to be the same. Everyone's supposed to look the same way. That's why people go get plastic surgery to all look the same. There's a whether you subscribe to it or not, every TV show, every movie, every magazine has people who look a certain way because that's the way you're supposed to look. And so everyone subconsciously is trying to look that way. That's why we buy the clothes we buy, except for the very small percentage who tries to be odd and different, but then all those people who try to be different end up looking the same. It's the whole cycle goes around.
Yes.
But these people, they all look different, and yet that's perfectly acceptable. So that's so starkly different from our society.
And so stark and better, because in our own society, we have people that judge people by their looks. And
well, sure.
And even though we do all look alike, much more than these people do, they're able to accept their differences far better than we are
Right.
as a world. And I think
That's
he's-
how it's so remarkably different from the world that we live in. So when you're reading this, you go, these people are completely different.
That's because in our society, that's what you're always taught. You're always taught to be a follower, not a leader, and that's why.
That's my whole point.
If you look at from a business aspect, one of the things I've learned in my management classes is you always you dress for the job you want, not the job you have. People that become managers are the ones that will say, you know what, everyone else is doing it this way. Let me try it this way. It might backfire, but maybe it'll pan out. And that they're looking for people that are willing to take that step and go against what everybody else is doing, and maybe it'll be more successful for the business. But the problem is, I mean, I can see it looking in high school and in college and society. Everybody wants you to fall into place just like everybody else, and as soon as somebody starts to get out of line, then it's whoa, what are you doing here? Unless you can prove that there's a reason why you're coming out and it's beneficial.
See, and in the first few issues, I related to how these kids changed, because I thought of, even though I had good friends all my life, and I still have some of the same friends I had when I was a kid, I was still unsure of myself, my place in society, that I would be not accepted, because I never made an excuse for the things I liked. I just liked what I liked, and that was it. But I could still see myself, as time has gone on, not thinking about it and just being my own person and being my own family. And in the one instance where they understand where they are, in that instant that they come out, it just took me, 10 years to go through that process.
Yeah, I mean, we all, you can say we all are trying to look for our place in our own little society, and they find it in that moment. She's a flyer. Boom, right away she's
part of this royal guard.
Right, he mentions that it's a great
rare gift,
a rare gift among the Inhumans, and I mean, there's no question that the humans in this book are the monsters. I mean, that's exactly what he's saying, is that here's a book about Inhumans, and they're, to our eyes, they may be ugly and whatever, deformed, whatever, but the humans in this book are definitely the monsters. But I think what a metaphor for puberty or teenage years, I mean, whatever it is, it's a powerful thing because we can all relate to it. Yet what's funny is, even in those changes, there's a hierarchy as well, because the one girl, just because she comes out with elongated fingers and nobody really knows her powers yet, she's the outcast now.
Yeah.
Suddenly there is a hierarchy. There's the, to use like something in high school, the jocks versus the nerds. This poor girl, yet her power is so profound and so powerful that she actually, I feel, is probably even, a greater part of the society, because she's a healer. So I mean, so it's interesting that not only is he playing with our own perceptions of these characters, but then they also look at each other in different ways, and a lot of that is because they're younger and they still have a lot to learn, but that was interesting.
And the other thing that says about it, that hierarchy, is while everyone has to be different, they all have to be the same at the same time. Because if you don't fall into the category that they want you to be in after your change, then you're out. You're either the second class or the third class citizen. If you're WAS, you go right down to the bottom with the alpha primitives, and then if you're just a freak, then you go to that second class where they're not quite the alpha primitives, but they do all the manual labor and stuff or whatever. And so
I mean, it says a lot about
they're all
their
different,
society.
but yet they still have to be the same. And so it's really interesting. They on the surface they might look inhuman, but they have a lot of similar qualities to humanity as well.
I mean, just the fact that they have alpha primitives. And I know that he puts in there that is what they are sort of bred to do. I mean, that's just in them. But so is the flyer, and so is the healer, and so is the tattoo guy. I mean, that's what's in you. I mean, that's what the whole purpose of the Terrigen Mist is, to bring out what's in you. And yet they still but the alpha primitives are still a lower class society or group of people, and they're basically slaves.
When WAS came out, didn't they say that they made a change, not a change, that they have changed the rules and they're going to put him with the alpha primitives? Don't they usually eliminate them?
No, I think that was like a freak thing, right? It's a freak thing that
it was a freak thing that one came out, but don't they?
Well, they said only when an alpha primitive dies does another one take its place.
Okay,
I hadn't caught that the first time I read it, so that's why it was so weird, because they weren't expecting this to happen, and yet they threw him in there, and then that guy never did what he was supposed to do, which was to watch him. They wanted him, that one guy that reported back to the royal family, they wanted him to keep watching him, although he lied and said he did. He never went back to check on what was going on.
He was with Maximus, right? 'Cause aren't in the end? In the end, isn't he in the prison with him?
Who was?
Who was?
No, not Woz. The guy that Jamie's talking about. The guy with all the big horns and stuff like that.
What guy with big horns?
I
keeper.
know who exactly. I saw him there, but I didn't think he was in prison. I thought he was just kind of there, but maybe you're right.
Because Maximus was the reason why Woz became
Right.
what he was. He manipulated his process somehow.
I thought he just manipulated his powers to be able to, for Maximus to actually be able to move into the negative zone, move off the reflective surfaces like he did. I thought he mentally took away or manipulated his power.
Yeah. I can't find it.
I know exactly what panel you're talking about, Peter, and you could be right on that.
I
That
don't
guy.
remember. Where's that at? Well, that's early on. Yeah, that's
that's
the
early
guy.
on.
Yeah.
So, but some of the things I thought were kind of neat while I was reading it again was the way they actually put some other Marvel Knights tales into. I mean, the whole Black Widow thing was all part of the Marvel Knights Black Widow limited series, and
I think this was the first time you saw her, right? Yeah.
I think it was the first time they used her. I didn't think it was the first time you saw her for whatever reason, but I thought it was the first time that you saw a Black Widow that wasn't Natasha.
I think you're right. I think this was the first time that you saw her. Or that they
Why
used
do I
her.
not
can't
remember seeing
that.
Black Widow in here?
She's the one who gave. She was a blonde, the blonde that gave the Russian general
That little device thing that would disrupt.
Oh yeah, there
the
she is.
forces.
Never mind. I remember now.
I mean, I can remember people talking about the book, and especially Mike, our friend Mike. Yeah, I just saw it too.
Okay.
It's near the end. It does look like that guy is, and he looks like he was probably manipulated too. By the way, he's holding his horns and things like that. He didn't. I have to look at that again. But I don't know what issue number was out at the time, but our friend Mike was talking to John, I think, our other friend John, and he was saying, I don't get it. I don't get what Black Bolt's doing. I don't know why he's allowing this to happen. I mean, this is like 4, 5, 6 issues in, and there's nothing going on, and so just from, and that's the whole reason why I started picking it up, because I was like, wow, this sounds kind of cool, and I thought it was interesting that reading it on that monthly level, there was that sense of frustration. There was that
there's a
complete sense of
there's a total stress level there. You're going, God, just do something. They keep talking about how powerful he is over and over. He's one of the most powerful, super creatures on Earth, and he's not doing anything. And even when you read it in 12 issues in a row like this, you just feel helpless. You're like, oh my God, do something. And now you know how all the rest of the Inhumans felt. Again, Jenkins is pulling your emotions left and right here, making you feel the way all the characters in the book, the humans, the Inhumans, you feel it all. You understand where everyone's coming from in this book, because he pulls you all over the place.
And you empathize with Gorgon. That's he's like, I won't call him the Greek chorus, but he's the one guy that just he is asking all the questions you are asking as a reader. He is saying, why, Lord, why are you doing this? Why aren't you fighting back? Let me fight back. I will do this. Just let me do it, or let me in on the secret. And and that's part of to me the beauty of the final reveal is that there was that master plan there, and you see it, and you see what he did, and you see how he manipulated, and that also makes that last issue so much more powerful when he's going through and you're hearing Black Bolt's inner monologue about when will Gorgon trust me again? When will the woman I love, what he allowed to happen to Medusa, his wife, when will she learn to trust me again? Have I gone too far? When is it too far to protect those that you love? And that's, again, we keep saying the beauty of the writing, but that is the beauty of the writing in this book.
I see Gorgon, when I read it, I didn't relate to him at all. I saw him as the exact opposite of Black Bolt, where he's the reactionary guy.
The loose cannon.
Yeah, like, if he would have gone out, it would have made matters worse, extremely worse. And
those characters always bug me.
Well, and I think what's interesting is later on, when he's given the responsibility to strike at the fault line of the city, to separate it and things like that, he's pondering, my God, if I would have done that, if I would have taken charge, this whole thing would have went to hell. I mean, my society would have been completely destroyed. I would have battled the humans. It would have been hell for us. So I thought what was neat was that, Jenkins gives us that part for Gorgon where he's like, wow, I need to rethink how I think. I mean, So I kind of, I don't know if I ever really related to anyone. That's an interesting question. I'd have to read it again to see who I kind of sided with me. For me, Karnak was the one that's of all the ones that are even though he was in the plan, he's the one that I kind of went to more than any of the other ones. And again, it may be just because he sort of knew the plan. But he was kind of playing devil's advocate. He was sort of going along with the other ones too.
Yeah.
And what you said about that last issue about Black Bolt questioning himself, it's an interesting question because, how far do you go? And he went pretty far. He allowed people in his society to die. Mm-hmm. I mean, that whole story about Winston Churchill, about the whole code and thing, is that true? I didn't look it up.
Oh, yeah, that is true.
That is very true.
What do you do? I mean, and he let his inner circle find out, but what about if the rest of the population found out? How would they react to it?
But then again, he didn't let the rest of his inner circle find out until Endgame. That was, when he had pushed it as far as he could push it, and, Medusa had knocked out all the power, and then he really, that was the time, okay, she did what she had to do, now we have to get all our other ducks in a row. And that's when, he let Gorgon in on the plan, he let Triton in on the plan, he let... because Triton took the message to Namor, not knowing what was on the message. Namor at the end comes back to Triton and says, this is what the message actually said. I had to tell you to bugger off, and I wouldn't help you because he knew there were people out there watching, and he knew he couldn't let you in on the plan. Same with Crystal. Crystal didn't know what the plan was. She had no idea. She was there, right with Gorgon saying, come on, let's fight. Let's get this over with. Why are we waiting? So, I mean, he really didn't let anybody in until the very end. Now, of course, Karnak, you were saying Karnak would have figured out what the plan was because he would always look for the weakness and in every plan, so he would know, probably he may not have known all of Black Bolt's inner thinkings, but he would have been able to figure it out. So,
but my question then is, what happens afterwards, though? I mean, what would you guys do? I mean, if you were part of the inner circle and you found out at 11:35, to use a Watchmen quote, and you had to go with it. You just had to go with it. This is it. But what happens after? I mean, do you allow? And then what happens if you're in the society? If you're one of the parents of that tattoo artist that died because of this? I mean, there's the whole the what is it? The power of the many outweigh the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But
it would be almost the same probably as the whole Winston Churchill analogy, where until everybody was that really mattered has passed away, and you find this out, then you can answer that question.
And by that time it's easy because hindsight would have already been there.
But I mean, if we use our group as an analogy, and something like this would happen. And I would, it would be, Brian's plan and Peter's Karnak, who knows, and I'm Gorgon sitting there chomping at the bit to fight. I don't know. It would be very tough for me to totally trust. I mean, that's the whole thing about that when they call it a royal family, as far as, as royalty, you pledge yourself to your king and you believe in what he stands for and you fight for what he stands for and he has your loyalty. But it would also make me want to question the next time he ordered me to go out and do battle, or I would still have that in the back of my mind. Has he totally told me the truth? Do I know what I'm going to fight for, or is the battle true? Is is my fight true, or does he have some kind of machinations in the back that I don't know about? So yeah, for me it would be I would have just a little bit of a doubt. I'd still be loyal, but I'd have that doubt.
And it goes back to what Brian said about these. This is not a superhero team. I mean, if it was that way at all before Paul Jenkins got his hands on it, it's not as you're reading it. I mean, they are a royal family. That's the way they think. They're Inhumans. They're different from us, and so it's not all going to be cut and dry. And like what you said about having questions, I mean, he ends the book on a question. I mean, he says, imagine that you could save a family by sacrificing a child, but that you had to explain it to the child. What would you say? Yeah. I mean, he's leaving it very unresolved as to it's. Not that they would ever go back to this, and Paul Jenkins doesn't want to go back to this, but it would have been very interesting to get issue 13 to see the ramifications of his plan. I mean, that's the only thing you don't get.
Well, it's an age-old question. I mean, many military commanders have had to ask themselves the same thing, and there's no easy answer. The easy answer is, we'll stop fighting and go home. They could have just picked up the city and blinked it off to Antarctica or the North Pole or whatever. Before the battle, like they fired the first shell. They could have just said, "That's it," but they wanted it to be a mystery, and they didn't want people to know where they were going. So, what's more important? The world not knowing where the Inhumans are, and is that worth losing a few people, or can they just be on display in the Arctic and have people leave them alone? That's the question you can't answer. So it's not, me. My feelings about war and everything. I would say you keep those people alive, and you just go off and live by yourself and join the United Nations and get people to leave you alone and participate in the global community. But there are other cases in time in history where you do have to sacrifice a few if it's going to save a whole lot. It's kind of like, if you could go back in time and kill Hitler, but when he was 13, would you do it? I would be the first person to say you put a bullet in that guy's head, because that would be better. But in this case, maybe your soldiers maybe their lives are more important than your anonymity in the world. Get Lockjaw, go to the Baxter Building, and Reed can develop some gadget in a half an hour that'll disguise all of Adelan, and they'll never know where it is. It could be hovering above New York City, and no one would know.
I thought it was kind of cute, and now, especially knowing now what where they've taken the character, I thought it was kind of cute that Lockjaw was playing with a thing, a thing toy, knowing what they did in the Thing series with Lockjaw.
The other thing that this story really made me feel strongly about is, I feel so bad for Black Bolt that he can't talk.
Really?
It's just it just made me so. It just made me. I felt his isolation. Again, the writing was so good at that I felt exactly what Black Bolt was feeling, and I just felt so isolated. Every time he'd be in the room, and he just has to look at his wife and say, and he's not saying anything, but he's saying it with his eyes, and I'm like, dude, get a chalkboard and write it down,
That's why I don't feel bad that he can't talk. Is he too lazy to learn sign language, or to just write stuff down?
Yeah, but it's that's the book, and again, Reed could develop some sort of thing that could
amplify
read his
thoughts.
psychic thoughts and speak it over a speaker, but it's the character, and he just feels so alone, and I feel bad for the guy.
Sort of along those lines. One of the forum posters says, Stormy Weather says, "Okay, I love this book. I knew nothing about the Inhumans before reading this. It made me go back and find older stories with them. The expression that says if you introduce a gun in the first act of a story, it better go off by the third or something like that. Well, I was a bit disappointed that Black Bolt never said anything. I wanted to see it happen. P.S. I want a Thing chew toy for my dog like the one that Lockjaw has."
There is a story. I'm pretty sure that I read something after I read this.
Earth X.
No, I never read that.
You never read Earth X?
No. Where...
There was a 4-issue miniseries after this.
Yeah, I don't know. It might have been in some old FF or something, but I'm
That's when they moved the city from the Himalayas They moved it up to the moon.
I remember a scene where Black Bolt
Says
whispers,
something.
and then it kills, annihilates a bunch of enemies or something. But I kept thinking it was in this because my terrible memory, and I was thinking, oh, this is the book where at the end he actually just whispers and blows the Portuguese army away, and then I got to the end like, no, okay, that's not what happens. Where did I read that? I don't remember.
It might have been in those Burn ones because I agree. I read that too. But
there is that in the Burn Fantastic Four. They moved the city to the blue area of the moon, and
Right.
he moves the alpha primitives away, and then the caption even says, he speaks, and all of a sudden the next panel's like this huge explosion under the
And
city.
that must have been where
and then they lift it up.
That must have been where I read it then.
So he has used his power, but
Right.
very rarely.
I like that it showed him meditating to control his power while he slept.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine the force of will to do that. Because apparently when my kids come screaming over and crawling to bed, I'm like, what the hell are you kicking me for? Stop it!
It was an interesting. It was. I read an article from Paul Jenkins that this was actually Jay Lee's idea. Whether to work on the Inhumans or to reimagine them a little bit, it actually came from Jay, and I liked the differences, and they're subtle. I mean, not only in design but also in the way they do their powers, and even though Karnak had that ability beforehand, it was never played like it was in this 12-issue miniseries. I mean, not only does he see the flaws, like to be able to strike at the ground or something, but he can see the flaws in humans as well, or in other people as well, and just the way they did it with the red eyes and the scraggly lines and things like that. Gorgon's look is a little more bestial, and Medusa's wild. Karnak with all the tattoos on his face. I really dug the how it's slight, but it makes him even more removed from what we are and what from superheroes are and the Fantastic Four and so on and so forth.
well, I mean, especially with Karnak, when you go from his old costume that was that green.
Yeah,
Because I just saw that looking
Did you
through
look it up?
your Marvel Universe books here, just the green helmet thingy, and then because he just looks like a guy in a suit, as opposed to now he looks like an Inhuman. He has that different look to him.
I have to say, just go back on Black Bolt for a minute. Reading that made me kind of think about Superman, about you're that powerful, but yet you always have to be so cautious with your power. How much, if you're going to punch just an ordinary human, how much force do you know to put into it without the risk of crippling them or killing them? Or just, when you sleep, what's going on? If you start sleepwalking, what could happen? So I kind of just maybe rethink Superman, really, just being that powerful, but always having to be restraining yourself in fear that even the people closest to you can wind up hurting.
You mean with great power comes great responsibility?
If you want to go back to that.
I thought out of all the Inhumans, Crystal was the one that had the least development and the least to do in the storyline, and I was kind of upset.
I did too.
Not upset, but that her daughter isn't even used, Luna. I mean, especially when you talk, because this is such a not psychological, but it's heady. That story is more cerebral. When you're playing with the ideas of society and what you look like, her daughter is human. I mean, they chose not to put her in the Terrigen Mists, and
but then I think also if you're going to introduce her daughter, then you have to go into the parentage, and you'd have to talk about Quicksilver and get into that. Maybe they just wanted to keep it just the Inhumans,
And maybe they assume that you've seen Crystal about 50 million other times in half the Marvel comics.
Yeah.
I mean, she's like the only Inhuman that you ever see.
Yeah, she's usually the one that
Now, my one big question about Crystal is, how the hell does a black circle stripe stay on her hair, and how is it always perfectly round and everything? What is that? What's the deal with
she's an
that?
Inhuman. That's why.
if her sister has the hair that can do anything, force of will, she can do a little bit with her hair, I guess.
I guess that is Luna at the end there. But it would have been. But it would have been interesting because of all the Inhumans, she is the one that knows probably the most about human society because she's been with the Fantastic Four a lot, and I don't know. That's really not a criticism because it didn't show up.
I was just disappointed because she's the one I knew the most when I read it.
Yeah.
First, I knew her up to that point more than any of the others.
Was she? Oh, I'm sorry. Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, maybe I just wasn't reading closely enough, but I didn't quite understand. I mean, you see the image on the back. How did that fall into place with the storyline?
Those were the guys in the. They show them. They were. I can't remember.
Because
now.
it's
It's issue
right from
4
the
or
book.
5.
Yeah, because seeing that picture, I thought, oh, that's going to be something important in the story, that maybe they'll be stripped of their powers, but they're still kind of keeping that identity. And then you just saw it for a page or two, and it's like, I don't quite understand. Is this a reenactment kind of? Or?
No, it wasn't even them. It was just people pretending to have their powers. I thought pretending to be Inhumans.
It was sort of a way to look at how people are reacting to the whole conflict, and these people are relating to the Inhumans, by the way they're dressing up. And he says, those who would hunt us down like animals, those who ridicule us because they do not understand us, those who tremble in fear at the righteous idea of our existence, basically using the conflict to push their own agenda, whatever that may be. It's not as developed. You're right. It's not as developed as it could have been. I mean,
Well, yeah, because they're they're trying to declare themselves a sovereign state.
right.
They're trying to declare themselves they're Inhumans, and they're not gonna. Because then the officer says, doesn't make no difference, Lipinski. You're still got to pay taxes like everybody else.
Right.
So it's they're trying to say they're Inhumans, and they're making this a sovereign state. It was of course around the whole times of David Koresh and all those people trying to declare themselves sovereign states and such.
We got an email from Derek Coward from the Comic Book Noise podcast. It says, "Hey guys, great pick. Out of all the Marvel books of the month, this is by far my favorite. I had never really noticed Paul Jenkins before this storyline, and I was really impressed. The Inhumans in this series seemed less of a random superhero team and more like the society in the Clive Barker film The Nightbreed.
Oh, love that movie.
I've always hated Jay Lee's work ever since the debacle that was Hellshock #1, but I was able to ignore the bad taste he leaves on my eyeballs and actually liked it after about 40 pages in. Tanaja's transformation sequence was great. I used to disregard the Inhumans and just lump them in with teams like the Eternals and the New Gods, all Kirby creations coincidentally. But with this mini and the 2004 series, they are now among my favorites. So until Medusa makes Black Bolt scream, "Baby, don't stop," keep up the great work."
Medusa grew back her hair, right?
Eventually.
Yeah, it grows back.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm in the minority or what, but I've always dug Jay Lee's work. I had stopped reading Namor before Byrne left, and then I started buying it again solely because of the artwork. And I've since realized that he's certainly not right for every book.
No.
He has certain books, and the way that this story is written, the isolation and the moodiness, his work was perfect for it. But after that, I'm halfway through the second Ultimate Fantastic Four hardcover, and he's got like a 2-issue story in there. And I started reading the first issue, and it's like this art, he doesn't work for the lightheartedness of Ultimate Fantastic Four. I love his work, but I don't think it fits the book. So, and then to read this is like, this is perfect for him.
A book like Superman, I don't want him on, but Batman,
right? Yeah, exactly.
You could see him doing a Batman book.
Yeah, definitely not one of my favorite artists, but I did like him in this, even though it just, like I said, it distracted me a little bit this time around. But it is my favorite. My favorite work he's ever done is this series.
Yeah. And Hellshock was crap. So
well, it was the whole image thing, it
was
was every artist wanting to make $1 million.
It was him trying to do his own book. So.
Right.
But at least he tried it.
Some more comments from the forum. And by the way, this did win an Eisner for Best New Series in 1999, just to show how important it was.
I was going to ask if it got. I couldn't remember if it got critical acclaim or not.
Yeah, it was. I was pretty sure it was pretty widely recognized.
Especially, again, to come out of Marvel,
Uh-huh.
this kind of book. That's what really was like.
Palmiotti and Quesada making some bold decisions.
They knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because this came off the heels of Extreme. Awesome. No. What was Rob Liefeld's company that. Was it Extreme?
There was Awesome Entertainment.
Which came first, Extreme?
Well,
Awesome?
you know how they
Oh, no, I
the
know what you
Heroes
mean.
Reborn thing.
I think that was Extreme because
Okay.
I think Awesome was the last one.
So then the whole idea then was that everybody was like, okay, now Event I believe it was Event that Palmiotti and Quesada, the company that
Yes,
Oh,
that was
right,
a couple.
yeah.
they were
Ash.
like, yeah, they're going to take over a certain subsection of Marvel, and everybody was like, oh no, we're going to get another Heroes Reborn. But no, it turned out to actually work, and they
Well,
took the failure of the first thing and
I was gonna say they took characters nobody wanted.
Right.
I mean, Daredevil was going to get canceled. They said,
Yep.
"Hey, we'll take Daredevil. We'll put Kevin Smith on it. Granted, it took him forever to get it out, but once it was out, it was good stuff. Took a character like Black Panther, put Christopher Priest on it, a guy who loved the character. It became a book that still is amazingly underappreciated by most people, and anybody who's read it. I've never met one person who's read it who hasn't loved it.
Is that when they created the Marvel Knights book itself with the group of
That
Eventually,
came,
yeah.
that
team members?
came out of it later.
I mean, yeah, Punisher was a misstep, but if it wasn't for this, Quesada wouldn't be where he was today. There's no doubt in my
no
mind
way.
because they saw what he could do with that small section and said, "Hey, let's give him the whole toy box to play with."
And what happened?
there are some.
And then Civil War was late.
Let's not give it all to Quesada. It was also Palmiotti too. In fact,
Oh, no,
some people
I
think it
think-
was more Palmiotti.
No, and to me, I don't think Palmiotti would be doing the stuff he's doing now if not for this. And I believe me, I'm a huge Palmiotti fan. He and Justin Gray right now are two of the best creators I think
Yeah.
out there.
All right, let's go to the forum. Freaky Tiki says, I'm so happy that this is the book of the month. It is such a great miniseries. If you don't become a Jay Lee fan after this book, you need your head checked. So that's his take on Jay Lee's. I'll read some quick ones and then we'll go to
One
this.
to Brian's side.
Nixel Pitalik. Oh, no, I can't read that. I got to read one before it. Aqua Troy says, just finished number 4. I loved Medusa's reaction to Black Bolt's meditations. This is in quotes. It terrifies me to think that my husband can so easily close the door to his mind and lock everything and everyone out, including me. He continues, that's brilliant. Relax is a good word. Wish more people would say it and practice it. I like Crystal's reaction to the new Alpha Primitive among them. She's right. Why do the Inhumans feel superior to the Alpha Primitives when they're not exactly natural themselves? My name is Waz might become my new signature. Read on a politically incorrect show is a nice idea, but that bit reminded me how much I hated that show. Karthus is up to something. Karthus must be the guy with the big horns and stuff. Is Maximus going to join a Red Hat Society? Which I don't get. So that's just some thoughts from him. Benchcoat says, I really enjoyed the series. What I remember the most was how well the first issue captured my attention. I wasn't sure how anything was going to play out. On the last page, I didn't know whether Black Bolt was stone cold James Bond cool incarnate or batshit crazy. But I knew I would be reading the whole series. I also enjoyed the shifting viewpoints as the new issues came out. It provided a nice touchstone for the overarching plot by filtering it through each individual's reactions to the events of the story. Forgot a bit. I think that Jenkins and Lee did a great job establishing the Inhumans as an alien society. They did not play the Inhumans simply as another superhero team, but instead provided more of a sci-fi feel for the series. We can see vast cultural differences among human societies, so it makes sense for a group like the Inhumans to be more alien in feel. Ping33 says, rereading the issues again, I think I was actually... blah, 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 blah. That's
He was actually blah, 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 blah.
random thing. Okay, about Waz. First off, it seems funny to me that they would just write it off that he evolved into an alpha primitive. Had they given it a few hours, they might have seen his secondary mutation when his head split. It also strikes me as something of a cheat that Medusa and Black Bolt are misled by Bluehorn Guy as to the nature of Waz's new life. There are a few times in the first half of the series where I think Jenkins misleads you as to the competence of Black Bolt's reign. This feeling of events outpacing planning is key to the drama of the series, but it does come off as cheap on subsequent readings, though. On a total side note, man, do I miss letter pages and Stan's soapbox. I am reminded yet again... this is all... That's...
Edited
So
by
he takes
Peter
off.
Reeves.
It's a whole other topic. I find it remarkable how self-contained so many of the issues are. It's the rare series which works both monthly and in trade equally well, but totally differently, and this is certainly one of those series. At least half of the issues could almost be standalones in themes of impact and feelings of closure. I think that this also contributes to some of the aloofness of the series, which is so integral to mood. It's just staggering thinking about how many levels the series is working on, from the deep sense of mood which affects the reader's subconscious to the high sociological themes of genetic elitism to the political story and its look at the relationship between nations and how all of this somehow works to say something about the human condition. All of this with character and drama and suspense and art so beautiful, that I look forward to hearing Matt talk about Medusa in terms of his redhead fetish.
Can I ask you a question here? At the risk of going all coyote gospel on everything, the issue with the water guy, and when he goes to Namor, and they flash back to the old guy and the sinking of the Lusitania and how he was rescued by this guy, and aside from the 2 pages with Namor, that whole issue didn't add anything to the story.
I thought the same thing.
Was there a theme there that I missed? Was I supposed to feel something that I didn't feel? Because I got to that issue and I really thought, I'm like, well, everything about this whole series has been so rock solid and tight. Like there's not a wasted word or, everything. And I just kept thinking, I really think to make this 12 issues, he just kind of ran out and he knew it was 11 and a quarter issues.
Yeah, I see. I mean, there's the whole theme of sacrificing yourself for your child. It also gave Triton something to do.
Just like Aquaman.
No, I'm serious. Because when you come with a guy whose main power is the sea, I thought it was a very powerful issue because
I'm not saying that it wasn't a good issue. I'm saying it didn't fit in with the rest of the other 11 issues.
No, I think the main storyline was the sacrifice of the child, the grandfather, the love of he kept telling his grandson it was going to be all right. They were going to get there, and then in the end, he had to make the choice between could he try to save both? Was he going to just save the kid? I mean, he saves the kid, and then makes the attempt to go back to save the grandfather, and he doesn't get there in time. So I mean, he has to live with that guilt that he couldn't he tried his hardest, he couldn't save and do what he thought he could do. And really, I think it's just the whole issue just has to do with loss, and giving of oneself.
Right, but how
for
does
the
that
ones that
fit
you
in
love.
with the rest of
the whole
Inhumans?
giving up the city and allowing your wife to be almost raped and plundered, all for the betterment of
exactly
the city. Whereas you could say, Medusa was the grandfather, the kid was the city. So he saved the city, but he then in turn hurt everyone that he loved in that city. And granted, they didn't die, but maybe a little bit of them of each of them died, and that's again the questions at the end that he had for everybody.
I took it as the grandfather being Black Bolt, deciding that he was going to sacrifice himself, save my child first, my grandson. He's more important. Just kind of went along with the whole thing where Black Bolt had to decide, am I going to let this happen to my city for the betterment of what I think is better for my city, for what I think the city needs to do? Am I just going to let this all happen and let people die? I'll let myself die, save the kid, to progress the future of the bloodline that grandfather let his grandson survive. Same thing, let the future of Adelon continue. Let the society move forward as a result of this.
That issue actually made me think, where's Namor at if the Inhumans are inhabiting Atlantis?
Well, he was there earlier.
Part of Atlantis also was raised at this time.
Okay, so he's still overseeing Atlantis.
He's down. He's in his own kingdom down under the water.
But it's still Atlantis.
Yeah.
Well, and that was the whole storyline. He wanted them to give back Atlantis.
Right.
And that was when Black Bolt made the deal that
But that's only so they're only inhabiting a small portion of it. Okay.
Yeah, it's
like a suburb.
Well, it's almost as if you're saying Israel and Jerusalem, and they're if you were saying that Israel wants Jerusalem back when it was divided, and the Arabs have part of Jerusalem, the Israelites have the other part of Jerusalem. And in a deal, the Israelites gave, or the Arabs gave, so on and so forth. It's they each wanted it, but they weren't going to give each other the part that they wanted, and they weren't about to go to war over it. So they just gave up that part of it, sunk it, and took the city off to where they needed to take it.
The other thing with the Triton issue is since most of these issues each one, one deals with society, one deals with youth, one deals with Medusa's side of it, or or Lockjaw, and this is Triton's time. It says in there that he actually didn't go through the Terrigen Mists. I mean, you could almost look at like he is almost an outsider in his own in this society, and it's interesting that I think it's interesting that he goes to this big ship to talk about the problems. I mean, it's like one of the few times that you're actually getting a real outside look of the conflict. Because he's pulling himself out. He's not arguing with the other Inhumans. He's taking it totally somewhere else. And then the other thing too is the grandfather sacrificing the child. It taught Triton something about humanity. I mean, he just assumed that they were all that they were polluting the water and that they were barbarians. So he goes back to the ship because he's like, here's the whole thing that changed the way I thought about humanity because this grandfather sacrificed his kid. Yet here's this, now I'm again questioning mankind because they're coming after us. And that's all, I mean, he says that. He goes, which one of these is mankind? So it's playing on the themes that Paul Jenkins is dealing with. And part of it also, like when I was reading in the trade, it was a nice break. It was a nice break away from, because there was nothing really going on. I mean, if you think about it, nothing really happens. I mean, there's the wars going on and Black Bolt, there's indecision everywhere. It was nice to kind of step back, and because you knew that the next couple issues, all right, now we're going to finish it. It was kind of nice, a little calm before the storm. And that's sort of how I took it.
It just must have crossed my threshold for me seeing the subtext, because I got to that issue and it stuck out like a sore thumb to me, and I went, well, it was a good issue, but it really had nothing to do with the story, and I was eager to just keep reading the next issue, get back to the story. So, I mean, for me, that was just a little too much.
Did you have a question of who he was talking to? Did you know? Like,
yeah, I was like, what the hell is this all about? He's talking to the water? I mean, I don't get it. Because at
Well,
first
that's what
I
I mean.
thought he
Did
was
he-
talking to Namor. In the first page, you're led to believe he's addressing Namor when he's standing at the railing, and then you realize, okay, it's not Namor, and now who are we talking to? And then you're just kind of like, oh, it's just the boat. All right.
Well, because I mean, I forgot the whole story myself, and I'm like, who the hell is he talking to? I didn't know. I knew he wasn't talking to Namor. I was like, he's talking to somebody, right? And then it's like, oh no, he's talking to the shit. He's talking to something that mankind created, something that goes against what he is, And it's interesting. It's powerful.
Maybe that's why it didn't connect with me, because I would never just talk to nothingness like that.
It goes against everything he's ever been taught to believe, and
Right.
yet showed him a glimmer of hope for humanity in that instance.
And now we're back to war again.
Yeah.
To me, I honestly never thought he was talking to anybody. I thought it was just a totally inner dialogue he was having with himself. Just because I have that. I have inner dialogues with myself when I have conflicts.
We hear them.
Well, yeah. Sometimes I do.
Is that when you move your mouth?
inner monologue.
Is that when you move your mouth and don't say anything?
Yeah. No, that's you reading.
All right.
I don't read that way.
Yes, you do.
From Rebus, he says a couple thoughts regarding Jay Lee's art. I wonder if, like Gene Colan Lee's work, wouldn't be easier to view if left black and white. Some of the darker panels seem a bit muddy. Also, I find some of the odd black shapes on facial features to be annoying. For me, this was especially noticeable in Book 2 with the drawings of the children before they went into the mist. The child's face should be clean, and the blotchy inks just didn't fit. First impressions on the entire book, I really like the dynamic between Black Bolt and Medusa. I know that if I told my wife I love you 100 times a day, she still wouldn't mind hearing it a few more times. Being in a relationship where she will never hear her husband say those words, along with knowing he can put her along with everything else out of his mind, must make Medusa crazy at times. This is either an example of a uniquely devoted wife and queen or woman being written by a man. Just a thought. If Marvel ever does the last Inhuman story, perhaps that's how it could end, with Black Bolt telling Medusa that he loves her. I loved Black Bolt and Medusa's internal monologue at the end. Medusa wondering if Black Bolt will still love her when the mission is complete. Black Bolt wondering the same. Nice insight. When I was a kid, I loved characters like Gorgon. Loud, obnoxious, says what he feels, does what he feels like doing. Stuff like that is real appealing when one is young. However, when one grows up, that crap gets real annoying. I cheered when Karnak knocked that obnoxious-ass clown down a couple of pegs. I love the interplay between the newly transformed kids. 3 cheers for the late bloomer, the healer, giving the gifted one, the flyer, the finger. All in all, the book was a great read. My only problem I had was with Jay Lee. I like the page layout very much, and I think he's a fine draftsman. However, he could use an inker. Lee's inks look like his pen spit up a little ink, and instead of getting some whiteout to cover up the blob, Lee just made some crazy shapes that would incorporate the blob and approximate the appropriate shadow. All the close-ups of Maximus's face got a bit annoying. If you strung all the close-ups together, you would get a crazy version of that old Godly and Cream video for their song Cry. Pulling out some obscure references.
Thank you, obscure reference man.
And to think that, and just to show that not everybody enjoyed it, General Zod said this is going to be an unpopular stance. You take one of the most powerful groups of creatures, people, in the universe and put them in a miniseries. Do you get mind-blowing action? Nope, you get a story that frankly bored me. It struck me as really slow. I've always been a big fan of all the Inhumans, especially Karnak and Black Bolt, but these characters that are made for action do nothing. Knowing that at any moment the Inhumans could mop the floor with their aggressors made the whole assault inconsequential to me. To see them be the whipping boys of the modern world did nothing for me. Maybe it's that after seeing Black Bolt's action in Son of M, which I consider to be fascinating and exciting, I am jaded. Oh, and the Triton background story did nothing but disrupt the flow. I dug the dark and gritty art. It worked perfectly with the story. 2.5 out of frickin' Swears. Mixes Pitalik agreed. He says, I agree with most of what you said, Zod, though I wouldn't say I was bored by the series, but rather extremely frustrated. I realized that to a large degree that this was the purpose, to make me as a reader feel the frustration of the rest of the Inhumans. While effective in that regard, that doesn't necessarily make the book enjoyable. I'll go 3 out of 5 fricking Swears for Jay Lee's wonderful art and for the book being effective, if not a pleasure to read.
General Zod is the only one that feels that way. I kind of came out of it thinking, I just don't care.
Why? Not enough what? What about it?
I found some parts to be predictable, and it just...
Predictable?
Yeah.
Like what?
Like the whole Waz thing. As soon as he had that interaction with Maximus, and then they faked his death, I was like, oh, okay, so I see what they're going to be doing with this guy. And then I not specifically figured out what Black Bolt was doing, but I had an idea that where he was going to some extent with his plan. Not that, like I said, specifically what he was doing, but just there's a specific reason why he's doing this, and there was enough interplay to know that by the humans are basically throwing the first stone, and by continuing with that, it's just going to keep escalating and escalating, and in the end, either he's going to have to annihilate everybody, or the Inhumans are going to greatly suffer. So, to some extent, I could kind of see where I was going, and I don't know, like I said, maybe I just don't have any kind of attachment to the Inhumans, but in the end, I just kind of felt like, oh, okay. If I would have never read it, it wouldn't have bothered me reading it. It doesn't impress me enough to think, it takes me to that, okay, I see why it had this reputation, what groundbreaking storyline this was.
Does it have anything to do with like what you particularly like in what you read? I mean, since it is it can be like more. It's not straightforward. It's more cerebral. The art. I mean, there's all that kind of
stuff.
stuff.
Wait, you're saying I don't like cerebral stuff?
No, but I mean, what about it? What would you wanted to have seen in it? Like, I'm just trying to, get.
I know. I don't know. I mean, truthfully, with Black Bolt, at the end, I kind of, and I don't like to always come back to this, but in a way, it's like, okay, so he's kind of doing what people complain about with Batman over the last couple of years, where he's pushing people away. But if you could get inside his head, he's doing it for the betterment for themselves. So, like, a lot of people don't like that, he's a dick to people, even the ones closest to him. But I figured that out with the way with the way Batman thought years ago when they first started to kind of do that. So that's why coming into with Black Bolt, like I can understand. There's you have to do this sometimes. Tough love type of thing.
So it all boils down to you're an emotionalist bastard.
Well, truthfully, that's funny to say. The last page of chapter 8 with where he's leaning down to Lockjaw.
Oh, right.
It made me think about this years ago when it was in '99 actually. Came down to steps to get ready for work, and I found her dog dead. And going to work, we used to always rip into each other. Well, it kind of came out that the dog died, and I remember the Pepsi vendor coming over to me, saying about how. He goes, I know it's tough. When my dog died, I was crying and I had to bury it by myself. And it's just like, there would be days where nobody else seemed to give a shit about what was going on with my life, but I still had my dog. And then a year later, he told us that he had cancer. And I said, I think you buried the only person that gives a shit.
Oh,
So, yeah, I guess I am kind of insensitive. But I don't know. It just
didn't work for you.
it didn't work. Like with V for Vendetta, that was one of those books that when I came out, I was like, all right, I'm jazzed. I have a certain feeling. And this, it just didn't do it for me. There was nothing really to get me locked into it. I was like, you know what? I'm excited about this. It connects somewhere.
I mean, I came out of this going, well, that's a rough decision. And I can't honestly say I was happy that I knew that, I didn't get it the first time I read it, but I mean, like when I read it now all the way through, I was like, well, I almost wish I didn't know that happened like that. You know what I mean? And I guess that's the point.
That's not at the end. I'm like, oh right, because I love it when a plan comes together. I do. I'm serious. I hate
regardless
in movies
of the death.
I hate in movies when somebody's got this ultimate plan written up and somebody just happens to trip. The cop who's walking down the street trips, and then as he's bending down to tie his shoelace, he looks and he sees like someone jumping over the roof, and he goes, "Oh, that's where they are." It's like, no. They had the perfect plan. They should be successful. And so in this, that's how I felt. Like Black Bolt had the perfect plan, and it all worked to a T, and he got exactly what he wanted. And so it made me so happy at the end. Like,
well, that's
perfect.
because he didn't really tell anybody.
Right, exactly, and that's why I love that, and that's when you were saying, like, oh, I don't know if I was Gorgon, I don't know if I'd ever trust. I'm like, no, you're supposed to trust him because he knew that no matter how much you trust people, the only person you can really trust is yourself, so you don't say anything, and then no one can screw it up, and then it's going to work perfectly. And that's how I felt, like, okay, he did it, he wasn't weak. He needed one accomplice, and that well, he had two, he had his wife, who you should be able to trust, and he had Karnak, and everyone else, he shut them all out because he wanted the plan to work because it was crucial that it worked, so he couldn't take any chances that there could be any weak links, even if it was an honest mistake, even if somebody just wants to do the right thing, but they screw up accidentally. He didn't tell these other people because that's what you're supposed to do if you're a good planner. You're supposed to just do it right, and everything worked out. And I was so happy at the end when the ring reveal happens.
That's great for the technical side of it. What about the emotional impact?
But I didn't get any emotional impact.
I don't get emotional.
But that's not what you're supposed to get from your family. That's the whole thing. This is a family, and they were all in it together. And
no, it's okay.
And to me, if
I
was
feel hurt by that, I would feel like, oh, that's cool. You wanted it to be.
No, I wouldn't, because I would think you would. If I am good enough to be your general of your army, I should also be good enough to be part of your plan.
Not when he's a hot-headed guy like that.
If he knew what it was, he wouldn't have been the hot-headed guy.
But wait.
No, he's always hot-headed.
Karnak
is always hot-headed.
No,
I mean, not Karnak. Gorgon is always hot-headed.
No, he's not. That's the whole thing. He was only hot-headed because he wouldn't let him in. If he had let him in from the beginning, and he had been with him from the beginning, there wouldn't have been any questioning, and that's part of the whole story.
His character in general, outside of the story, he's always a hothead. That's who he is, and so you can't trust a hothead.
Wait, Jamie. How do you know if Gorgon knew the plan as it was progressing? He wouldn't be going, "Are you sure about this? Are you sure we can trust this?"
No, because he would trust. He's a loyal enough soldier, and
part of the family,
that he would trust. Black Bolt to do, that he knew what he was doing. That was the whole part of the story that I think he wanted to tell, that as a family, he had to, and that goes back to him being able to shut out his wife, being able to shut everything out of his, all the emotion out of his existence. That's who Black Bolt was, and deep down, even though they considered themselves a family, the royal family, he didn't, and he was questioning, how are they ever going to trust me again? How is the woman I love going to trust me that I allowed her to do this? How are my subjects, especially the ones who know what actually happened, how are they ever really going to trust me again? Has everything now changed?
By thinking, they'll get over it.
I think it is different. They're not just a family. I think there is some differences, and I think you do, because they're a royal family, I think there are some things that Black Bolt can do without having to rely on his or can do things in secret, I guess, if you want to say. I do. But like I was just thinking about what's going on in Civil War between Reed and Sue. I mean, he's hiding stuff. I'm not going to go deep into it, but he's hiding stuff from her, and it's hurting them. And I'm not sure if she did know what was going on, if she'd still be accepting of it. So I think it's different. I mean, he's in a tough spot. I mean, yes, it is family, but he's also a king, not only to them, but to whatever it is, like 1,400 people or whatever the number is. But I think there's far more. Paul Jenkins wants you as a reader to tap into your emotional side when reading this. I mean, there's no question about that. Because obviously, otherwise you wouldn't get half the stories that you get. You wouldn't get Lockjaw in love with Crystal. You wouldn't get the one Inhuman kid going against the girl with the long fingers. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many little things in there. That's just the little stuff that he's playing with, the stuff that we really pick up on. And then there's the stuff that we discuss, the bigger issues. So this is far more emotional than it is a technical plot.
Well, see, for me, it came down to the technical plot.
That's your experience of it. But Paul Jenkins, if I would ask Paul Jenkins what to say, he would say, certainly, yes, definitely, this is an emotional story.
And that's probably
your experience, but doesn't mean that's his intention.
That's probably why I couldn't latch on to it then.
Maybe.
I mean, I don't think it's a newsflash that Maddie's not a sympathetic.
Maddie. But just by calling yourself Maddie, you're being affectionate to yourself.
Well, I love the story you just told. God
Maddie.
Almighty, makes me laugh every time I think. For all the thoughtfulness that you show as a friend, it just amazes me that you cover
serious?
it up. Yeah.
What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
He just called you the Blob.
No.
He just called you the Blob before we started recording.
You know what though? Just like what you brought me back from San Diego, you think of little things and express it in your own way.
I believe.
Chicago, in your own way, that means a lot to me, just the way you do it. And I'm more accepting of the bullshit that you spout off, just because I know how you are.
I mean, oddly enough, I probably would be just like what's her name that got the wings. That she got such an awesome power that she looks at the other one. When I saw it, I was like, yeah, that probably would have been me when I was younger. I mean, that
See, that's the part that was maybe the part in the book that I had the most emotional reaction to, was because I was always the guy I got picked on. So I was like, "You bitch," I was.
Oh yeah, totally.
With the fingers.
No, the one.
The one with the wings. I was like, you can't be best friends and then just up and leave because you got a cool power, and think yourself not worthy. Because there were so many kids in my high school. I mean, it's like every high school, but ours was really bad with that. There were a couple cool kids, and everybody else was just dirt as far as those kids were concerned. And so that was the most emotional thing for me, because that was my my connection.
Yeah. I mean, if we've all done that, we've all done what she's done. I mean, that's what when I read it, I went, yeah, I've done that a couple times. That's, and it makes you feel bad. I mean, but that's what he's trying to point out.
I just thought, it's a shame. And then when it came back, I was just like, okay, I guess things are evening out.
Karma.
Yeah.
One last forum post from Chris W. This is the first time I've participated in a book of the month, and I'm glad that this podcast finally got me off my butt and forced me to read this. Something I've always intended to read since it first came out monthly. I absolutely loved it. Between this and Sentry, I think Paul Jenkins wrote two of the most important Marvel stories of the late 90s, early 2000s. I think a lot of people may find the storytelling groundbreaking, but it felt more to me like the standard Inhumans plot. What's Maximus planning? When will Black Bolt do something? That we've seen since the Lee Kirby days, but in this case, politicized and inserted firmly into the real world. Throw in a much higher level of character development, and what you get isn't necessarily new, but is instead the ultimate Inhuman story, taking the characters about as far as you can without drastically altering them. My complaints would be few. Although I liked the Triton issue, aside from the Namor segment, it didn't further the story very much. I would have liked to have learned a little more of his actual encounter with the man on the beach. What did they talk about? As a Fantastic Four fan, it would have been nice to see more of Crystal. I've always found her character interesting. To go from being so active in the outside world to essentially being stranded back in Adelan would have been an interesting perspective to show. Jay Lee's figures and faces are phenomenal, but I don't always get a sense of the grandeur of Adelan. In past stories, it always seems like this technological utopia, but at times it felt like one big dungeon to me while reading this. All in all, though, a pleasure to read, and I'm now hooked on the Book of the Month Club.
I think the dungeon was intentional because there was a lot of talk in this story about the alpha primitives and that second-class citizen, and so I think they did that on purpose to make you realize that Adelan isn't all shiny spires and technological wonders. You can still live in filth, even among grandeur.
Now, the alpha primates went with the Inhumans when they...
Primitives.
The
alpha primates.
Well, when they went to the... Okay.
Yeah, I would think they did because of
They're like
Like
two steps out.
They took the whole city with them, so I would have thought they would taking the underground.
I absolutely loved the first time I read it too. I was like, "That's brilliant." Was when Woz went into Maximus's eyes. That's a great.
Yeah.
Didn't see that coming.
Right.
Even the chapters. I think the chapter itself is like Windows to the Soul or something. What the hell? Is
Yeah,
it?
never even
Yeah.
thought of it.
Window to the Soul. Yeah, and I can remember even reading it the first time. I was like, "Of course."
There's no reflections in here.
And it, you know what? And it adds. You know what? Now that that one comment about Maximus and the close-ups of his face, I wonder if in some of those close-ups do they show the twinkle in his eye because he's a madman, and it's like setting up the whole thing. Yes, that's why we're showing you the eyes. It's because there it is. That's what's going to happen. I mean, that's me looking into it too much.
That
Well,
or-
look right here. There's a chapter. Where,
Jay Lee might not have had the script yet and might not have known to draw it.
yeah.
And my one question, which I did have one question, as Black Bolt makes his move when he's going to go and he's going to confront Maximus, and what is he doing? Is he whispering? Is he using that little pitchfork on the top of his head, tuning fork on the top of his head to zap people? What are the powers? What
Well,
powers
didn't they
is he doing?
explain that in maybe it was the first chapter? He, without even speaking, he can just do all kinds of crazy stuff.
Okay.
They went into that, I think, in the
I was just because I was looking at it going, okay, now how exactly is he doing that?
And that's like his ultimate power is his voice, but he has the other things. Yeah, Black Bolt is also able to direct the unknown particle outwards in other ways than by means of his vocal cords. So he has a power inside him, and he's able to do other things with it.
Okay, so that's what he uses a little tuning fork.
Yeah.
You know, with the one bit from the forum about how the last Inhuman story could be Black Bolt telling Medusa that he loves her as he blows her head off. It kind of made me think of the thing in Dogma where they went through like 3 atoms before they realized that God couldn't talk directly to humans without killing them. So that's kind of puts him up there in that almost godly. Well, I guess they are considered gods, but
Yeah, I mean it.
Now you're using dogma for actual religious discussions.
I see
This
this
is as close as you're going to get, but
as the ultimate Inhuman stories too. I've not read anything after. Now I haven't read the Sean McKeever one, but which sort of plays in the same characters and same setting. But this, even the 4-issue one that Pacheco did after was so different. Like this one to me,
I got the first issue of that, and I couldn't even get past that.
I liked it, but this seems to be the pinnacle. If I had to give somebody what are the Inhumans about, I'd give them this issue.
Yeah.
This trade.
I would agree.
because I didn't know other than their burn appearances and some other appearances in the FF. I didn't know anything about them when I first picked this up, so that's why I can't remember who said it that the first issue grabbed you, and this first issue did grab me when I was reading it off the shelf. To want to continue it and just get all the rest. I would love to see either an Essentials or them reprint the original Inhumans. I mean, I think it's only 20 issues, 12 issues.
I don't know. It's not long.
No,
Yeah,
it's along the same lines as the number of issues in the Eternal run. So,
1975 there was a series. In 2000 there was there was this one, and then in 2000 there was the 4-issue Pacheco and Ladron and somebody else, I can't remember. 2003, the one by McKeever. There was the Inhumans 2099 in 2004.
No, thank you.
And are they doing anything? No, I guess that's it then.
yeah.
There might be more. And Jay Lee, he's worked on things like Namor and Dark. He's going to be working on the Stephen King Dark Tower, Hellshock, Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3, 4 miniseries.
By
And
Grant Morrison.
Paul Jenkins, of course. Was this his first Marvel?
I don't know.
Paul Jenkins?
I think it was. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was.
I couldn't find that
Talk
anywhere.
about coming right out of the gate.
Well, yeah. Because I know he wrote Peter Parker and Incredible Hulk. He wrote Incredible Hulk after this, I know, because I was like, oh, let me read it because I read this.
That was the War Dogs. And
and I was like, ooh, that's not that good.
yeah,
and-
no, he really, because I think this was the first, because then that's what led you into picking up his other stuff, and you were
Yeah.
like, oof.
Yeah, I was like, ooh.
Sometimes I wish the fans could see like Peter's facial expression. Ooh, that's no good.
The Sentry was good though, and that's
Yeah.
both. That's Jay Lee again, right? Yeah,
Well, he did some of it. I don't think he did the whole thing. He didn't do the specials.
spin-offs stuff.
Yeah, he didn't do like those, but
And then of
You
course
three-
Jenkins did Wolverine Origins, which
Yep.
was great.
And Wolverine
or
The
Origin
End.
or whatever.
You three read Sentry, right?
Yeah,
I didn't.
You didn't. I didn't
I read
either.
yes.
Civil War Frontline he's reading now. Sidekick he's doing now with Chris Moreno. Generation M. He wrote the Daredevil Spider-Man crossover. Witchblade he wrote for a while. Darkness, I think, even with Jay Lee maybe. Spider-Man, Peter Parker Spider-Man. He had a 4-year stint on Vertigo's Hellblazer. And so that's some other stuff. So if you want some other stuff by Paul Jenkins or Jay Lee, that you can go look at that kind of stuff. And if you don't know the other Marvel Knights stuff, you should, especially Daredevil and Black Panther.
Yeah.
Man, that's just some great stuff.
I want to
they
read
would-
the Daredevil, the Black Panther, but the Daredevil is my favorite.
If they would ever trade the Black Panther,
Well, they got 2
Yeah.
trades, yeah.
yeah, but are they even currently being printed?
I
They
don't know.
probably need to just re-release the whole thing. And
I'd say if you want to read it, get out there, write letters, let them know, because it's definitely worth reprinting.
And this is our second. We did Daredevil. It was the first.
we did
yeah,
Daredevil.
first
that's right.
Marvel one we did.
So Marvel Knights hitting it again. So what would you give this? What rating would we give this?
Out of 5?
Yeah.
4.
I'd go 4.5 if it wasn't for that Triton issue. I think it'd be 5.
I between 4.5 and 5.
Triton. What the hell's his name?
Triton.
Triton.
Gorgon.
Yeah,
Gorgon.
Triton.
Triton. Gorgon,
That's-
take me away.
That's where I'm at. 4.5 to a 5. Because
Yeah.
for what it was, man, there's not many other Marvel titles that hold up to this. Limited series that hold up to this.
Oh, I still enjoyed it. Like I said, I enjoyed it more the second time around. All right, so next month we're doing Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, which you can get from InStockTrades.com. And that's September. And then October, we are going to go back to manga, and we're going to go to our roots, and we're going to do the first 2 volumes of Lone Wolf and Cub, being put out, re-released by Dark Horse. And you can get them also at InStockTrades.com. So it should be 2 months of great reading ahead of us. And we'll see you then.